I wanted to film this a lot sooner than I did, but those freshmen, man, they love suntanning under my window. Let's talk about squips. So I have been sort of asking around and trying to figure out what is one of the first things that I should talk about. I think I've actually come to a pretty good consensus with a lot of people. I didn't know this was a debate. Apparently it is a debate, so we're going to discuss it. Apparently there's a big question around the Be More Chill fandom about whether or not the Squip is a villain. And believe me, I was as surprised by that question as you are. So I obviously have an opinion on this, but I'm going to try and be unbiased as we go through this and sort of explain my feelings and why other people might have feelings on the other side. So let's look into it. First off, for anyone who's unfamiliar with Be More Chill, I'll kind of give you a breakdown about what the story is about.
Good morning! Time to start the day!
Be More Chill is about a 16-year-old named Jeremy who really is your typical 16-year-old. He has severe social anxiety, talking to people is difficult, isn't really cool, doesn't have a lot of friends. I mean, it's your typical high school stuff and typical high school feelings. However, he is presented with the opportunity to take a pill with a supercomputer inside of it, and that supercomputer finds its way to your brain, implants itself in your brain, and it tells you what to do. In theory, it's supposed to tell you what to do to be more popular, be more cool, be more chill. And the big question comes about, if you had the opportunity, if that was presented to you, to take a computer that would tell you what to do and how to behave absolutely correctly for everyone to like you, would you do it? Seems like an obvious answer. I think for some of us we would kind of jump at that opportunity, except that that's the whole point of the musical and the book that it was based off of is, are you willing to lose yourself in order for that to happen? So as far as I can tell, there are three main arguments for why the Squip might not be the villain in Be More Chill, and we're going to go over each of those and kind of figure out what people have to say about that. The first and most typical argument that I usually see all over the place, honestly, people have a crush on the Squip. You know what, actually, can we cross that one out? Can we just not talk about that? Yeah, okay. Look, I'm not saying that I don't have a crush on Jason Tam too. I mean, who doesn't? But two main reasons we're going to talk about why people say the Squip is not the villain. I'm actually going to split up these two reasons into two separate categories, and that is whether you see the Squip as an actual tangible being that really is there, or if you see the Squip as just a big metaphor. So let's start with the idea that the Squip is actually a tangible thing that really does exist in our world. So when asking people about this, I actually really hear the same argument over and over again, and that argument is that the Squip can't actually be the villain. The humans that created it are really the villains because the Squip is only doing what it was programmed to do. This argument kind of surprises me, honestly. I don't entirely understand it, especially because of this.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Not necessary, Captain. You may give it to Eve.
Actually, why do we have to leave right now?
Yeah, how come nobody ever really questions if Hal is the villain, or if Otto in WALL-E was the villain, or if Wheatley from Portal was the villain? And I know what the next argument is going to be. You're going to say Maddy, but those computers went against their programming. They weren't doing what they were programmed to do. That's when I have to step in and say, how do we know that the Squip is doing what it's programmed to do? We only know one thing about the Squip, and that is this.
It's from Japan!
Yeah, okay, there's another character in the show named Rich, and he was the one who was Squipped in the first place and introduces the Squip to Jeremy. And Rich tells us that the point of it is it's supposed to implant in your brain and tell you what to do and help you act correctly and help you to be cool. We forget that the Squip is the one who's telling him to say that, and the Squip would say that, wouldn't it? And I would provide the counter-argument that if the Squip's entire purpose was to make somebody's life better and was to make them more cool and act in their best interest, that the Squips are definitely not following their programming. Because that's the other thing I hear a lot. Oh, it's Jeremy who makes all the decisions. It's Jeremy who decides to go along with it and listen to what the Squip says. The Squip is just trying to make his life better. To which I have to ask, in what universe is shock therapy for children in a child's best interest? Yes, officer, these commenters right here. Yeah, I'm not really sure I'm buying that one, guys. And then there's so many other things that happen that I just don't understand how people can see would be considered in the best interest of the person who has the Squip.
You won't feel left out or unsure. You won't be
I don't have any clips of the Squip song, but if you ever get a chance to see Be More Chill, just pay attention to Rich when he's trying to give the Squip to Jeremy. His life is miserable. It's been ruined by this thing. It's telling him to say that his life has been made better, but what has it done? You could argue, oh, it fulfilled his purpose. He has friends, and that's what it was supposed to do. But I don't even buy that. Does he really have friends? I mean, he's friends with Jake, I guess you can see, because you see them talk to each other at the beginning and he gets invited to his Halloween party. But then the second that something happens to him, everybody's talking about it like they're not even friends. So does he really have friends? I mean, that kind of comes into the philosophical question about whether or not the Squip is a real tangible thing or a metaphor, which we'll get to in a second. But speaking of that, again, if you're not familiar with Be More Chill, the whole Rich set a fire scene has to do with the fact that Rich, who was this first kid who had the Squip in the first place, sets an entire house on fire because the Squip is making him so crazy that that's the only way he can think of to get it out of his head.
Rich set on fire and he burned down the house.
If the Squip were acting like it was supposed to, in the sense that it's supposed to be improving his life, you'd think that that would be something that wouldn't happen. And listen, while we're talking about programming, I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't think the Squip was actually programmed to improve people's lives. If anything, my theory is that the Squip is actually linked to a particular political party that's trying to create an army of obedient voters. I'm not going to say which political party because talking about politics on my first video is not a dream of mine. But I will say that that makes a lot more sense to me than the idea that there's this computer out there that was just created by a group of adults to make teenagers' lives better. In what universe not driven by capitalism is this ever going to happen? It seems a lot more likely to me that the Squip promises teenagers that it's going to make their life better, gets into their head, does them a couple favors to get their trust, so that once it has their trust, it can ask them to do scary things, like this.
Save the pitiful children.
I mean, it's clearly parasitic. It's trying to get into as many heads as possible. I guess it also depends on whether you're going to follow Broadway canon or the original show's canon. In the original Broadway recording, you hear the Squip say, "I'm going to improve your life, even if I have to take over the entire student body to do it." This is quite a big change from the Broadway version, where he says, "I'm going to improve your life, even if I have to take over the world to do it." So, I don't know. That seems like a programming malfunction to me. Now, you could argue that even if the Squip's goal was to take over the world or create an army of obedient voters or whatever it is that it might be designed to do, that still it's not the villain because it's just doing what it was programmed to do, and that a computer can't really be the villain. Now you're really opening up some really deep philosophical questions. Aren't all humans doing what they were programmed to do? Who's the programmer? What determines programming? Are humans really any different from computers with advanced AI in some ways? Which does bring us to our second category of arguments here. Oh, Maddie, you're taking the show too seriously. It's really not all that deep. The Squip is a metaphor. It's not a real computer. Now, the first thing I am going to say to this is that I actually disagree with this. The Squip as a literary device is a metaphor, yes, but the Squip in the universe of the book is a real tangible thing. But let's say we're going to look in the context of the book. Now, there are a lot of different interpretations that I've heard of for what the Squip could be a metaphor for. The first one, honestly, is one that I thought it was for a long time, and was actually surprised to find out later on was most likely not the case. I actually, when I first started listening to this cast recording, thought that the Squip was a metaphor for substance abuse. If you squinted hard enough, I think you could probably make a case for that, but I honestly don't think that that's the case. I think the other two are a lot more likely, and that's that the Squip is a metaphor for peer pressure, and the Squip is a metaphor for that voice in our head that berates all of us. If we are going with the idea that the Squip is a metaphor for peer pressure, we're kind of getting into some serious philosophical questions again. Now, what I think is a lot more likely is that the Squip is actually a metaphor for the voice in our head that tells all of us what to do and what to think. Because let's be real, in reality, every single one of us has a Squip. It tells us self-depreciating things about ourselves. It tells us that everyone's watching us. It tells us that we don't look good enough, that we're not working hard enough, that we're not doing enough. Heck, it tells me every time I sit down to start a YouTube video that my content isn't interesting enough. And given that the author of the original book struggled with this quite a bit, and that was the whole reason that the Voices in My Head song was created, it makes sense to me that that was what the metaphor was trying to be. In which case, I feel like that is the undeniable smoking gun proof that the Squip is the villain here. The self-depreciating voice in your head is not your friend. And you could argue that in some ways the voice inside your head that tells you what to do to be socially acceptable is in fact a good thing. I appreciate that there is social pressure that makes me know that I have to shower every single day, or that I, have to look presentable before I leave the house, or that I have to say nice things to people. That part of our voice is fine. I mean, that's understandable. It's the part of your voice that goes too far. It's the part of your voice that says you're not good enough, even though you walked out looking presentable, and that you're nice to people, that it's not enough. That even though you were nice to people, people think you're stupid. That even though you did your hair and makeup before you left the house today, that people still think that you're ugly. That's the part of your voice that's the villain. So I think since I've kind of tried to be unbiased and go back and forth here, you might be still wondering with the question, well, I don't get it, Maddie, what is it that you believe? I believe, in my personal opinion, that any arguments that the Squip isn't the villain are just looking in a little bit too deep into it. In terms of literary devices, in terms of writing, in terms of the way that the show was created, obviously the Squip was meant to be the villain. My opinion isn't changed based on the fact that it was programmed to do a certain thing. I think that's us trying to compare things to our real world, in which thankfully, our AI just isn't that advanced yet. We're looking at AI in a world in which it's able to make its own decisions. It's advanced enough to maybe not go against its programming, but to decide how it's going to fulfill its programming. In which case, I have to say, again, how is that supposed to be beneficial to children? How is telling a child over and over and over again, you're stupid, you're ugly, nobody likes you, as a way to get him to listen to you, not villain-worthy? How is cutting him off from his best friend and telling him to use the people around him and letting him know that he's the only one who can save him, how is that supposed to be in his best interest? And then that's kind of when we just start going into the circular arguments again. Well, actually, it was Jeremy who decided to listen to the Squip and block Michael in the end. Well, actually, the Squip didn't do anything wrong because it was just doing what it was made to do by humans. In fact, isn't that the argument that this country is constantly using to ignore the fact that we need better gun control? Guns don't kill people. People kill people. I should know. I'm a good guy with a gun. I mean, I get the feeling that if Squips were a real thing in our universe, that we'd be having this same argument right now. Why should I have my Squip taken off me? I'm a responsible Squip owner. Why should I have my Squip taken away just because that guy let his Squip tell him to take over the world? Anyway, we're starting to go down a dangerous political road again, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and end things here. I'd love to know what you think about this, so please leave a comment below. Tell me anything you agree, disagree with. I love to hear different opinions on this kind of stuff, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Thanks for sticking around for this crazy, somewhat intangible rant, and I will see you in the mezzanine.